Welcome back to Trend ZDI series. In the past episodes, we discussed a lot about the good guys and how the vulnerability transforms into a big defense protection. In this episode, Dustin is joining me again. Let's examine disclosure policy, how it turns a deadline turns into a weapon of defense. So, to start with, what is the disclosure policy? What's the difference between 30, 90, 120 days?
A disclosure policy really essentially means how you're going to disclose this bug publicly. And there are a lot of different types. For example, back in the early days, there was just full disclosure because there wasn't really someplace you could report it to. And that just means taking everything you know about a bug and going public with it right away, even when the vendors had no chance to respond. And the vendor said, that's not really fair. You can give us at least some time to respond to it. Then someone by the name of Rainforest Puppy, believe it or not, he came up with RFP policy. So essentially his policy for disclosing bugs. And at that time, it was really in Microsoft. So he said, for example, I'll give you 5 days to respond to my first email. And if you don't do that, I'll go public. And then like he gave them at the time, I think it was 180 days to produce a patch. And that became kind of the first disclosure policy. Over time, this started to be called responsible disclosure. But that was problematic because there were times when a researcher would feel that the vendor was not working in earnest faith with them to actually fix the problem. So then their only recourse then would be to go full disclosure. And the vendor would say, well, you're not being responsible with this information, and you're not, giving us a chance to respond. And the researcher would say, you're being irresponsible by shipping this horrible code to all of these millions of customers. So then we came up with coordinated disclosure. So that's very much like responsible disclosure, just without the moral judgment. So we work with vendors. Our key right now is 120 days. It used to be 180, but we worked with the vendors so much that we could shrink that down. There are people who say 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Our opinion is 120 works out great for us. But that's also for bugs that are privately disclosed. There are times when our bugs are actively exploited in the wild where you should shrink that quite a bit because the impact is already there. So, and again, that can go anywhere between 7 days to 30 days, just kind of depending on which agency you're dealing with.
That's a good trivia of where that really started. In a real world, things sometimes don't work. And you've mentioned that. So what happens behind the scenes if a vendor would miss the 90-day or worse, would not probably act on something that is critical, which means they will not release a patch? What happens?
Right. So with us, depending, and it kind of depends on the organization, but for what we do is we release a certain amount of information to the public that will allow network defenders to at least take some protections. Patching is great, and I always say that you should apply all the patches you can, but that's not the only defensive technique you have as a sysadmin, for example. So we provide the sysadmins and the defenders enough information to actually protect their systems, but not provide so much active information that the attackers know exactly what to do. And that kind of holds the vendors accountable. And we want to make sure that accountability is there over that 120-day timeline. And if they come to us at like 118 days and like, look, we just need an extra week, we usually like, okay, you're really working on it. We see like, okay, yeah, we can extend you a week or two. So we're not completely inflexible with that. But we found that if you don't hold the vendors responsible, they will take as much time as they want, which becomes unreasonable because the longer a bug is known, the better it is to be known by more than one person. And although the first person might have done coordinated disclosure, the second person who finds the same bug, they might have a different opinion and go full disclosure or take it to a criminal marketplace.
Yeah, correct. And I hear a lot about the word accountability. Let's move into a little bit on that. As CDI and Trend ZDI, we are a neutral party, right? How do we maintain and prioritize transparency over balancing what you've already mentioned about the interests, not just of the vendors, but also the industry and the users? How do we go about that?
Yeah, well, we've been at this for 20 years, so we understand the various tenets of what we need to do and the impact of what these bugs can do. So we understand when a bug is going to be incredibly critical in something like critical infrastructure, in something like an operating system that's used by billions. And we work with those vendors to make sure that they understand the risk. So using our experience and everything that we've done, we look at how widespread this could be. We look at the worst case scenario and we kind of go from there. But really, it comes on balancing out what is the real impact of this potentially leaking.
Yeah, and I cannot imagine how those negotiations happen day, night, and every day, right? Last question. Beyond the incentive, which we discussed a little bit, how does CDI really empower what you call earlier the researcher, the community of this brand defenders? How do they empower? How do we empower them? And also, how do we ensure that the industry continue to elevate their standard of work?
Yeah. So, first, going to the security researchers, kind of the conversation we were just having is one of the best things that we do for researchers. We handle all the communications between us and the vendor. So, the researcher doesn't have to talk to the vendor. In fact, they never talk to the vendor. So, they come to us, they sell us the bug, and then they go off to find other bugs. And we handle all those difficult conversations. That's one thing we do. We also have kind of a frequent flyer program. So the more points you grit, the higher you earn. And at our highest level, it's like a 25% bonus on top of everything. And the other thing that we can do is to elevate the researchers by giving them, putting the spotlight on them, showing how intelligent they are and able to find all of these things. Not every researcher wants that. Some want to remain anonymous, and we respect that. They remain anonymous. But for those who do want that spotlight, you can go to a bunch of conferences and see a bunch of bugs that came through the ZDI program being presented. Because we are such a large force within the industry, well, we participate on a lot of different boards and think tanks and are able to help influence even at the CVE level, the very basic level, all the way up through at the government level. We're able to show that influence because we see bugs from the very, very beginning of their life all the way through to when they're patched and then later to when they're exploited. We have a unique vision that we offer to the industry, and we are able to exert our influence, hopefully, for the better, but definitely for what we think is the best and what we think is going to be the best for Trend customers.
Yeah, and I like that ending, which is whatever is best for our Trend customer. So thank you, Dustin, for joining me in our first 3 series. On our next episode, we will now zoom in and put the spotlight on the researcher. We've been talking about the researcher, so we'll zoom in and spotlight on them. Join me and the rest of our Trend Micro CDI researcher. Find out what really keeps them awake at night, but also what are they passionate about? Why are they in this industry?